Elijah and the prophets of Baal, fire on Mount Carmel. When God answers and idols fail, Israel was in crisis, not only politically but spiritually. Under King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, the nation had turned from the Lord to worship Baal, the Canaanite storm and fertility god. Altars to Baal rose across the land, and prophets of the Lord were hunted down. In the midst of this rebellion stood one prophet, Elijah, whose very name meant, "The Lord is my God." The story of Mount Carmel is one of the Bible's most dramatic confrontations, a contest that revealed the futility of idols and the unmatched power of the living God. The challenge issued for 3 years. Drought had scorched Israel, God's judgment for their idolatry. At God's command, Elijah appeared before Ahab and called for a public showdown. The setting would be Mount Carmel. The participants, Elijah alone against 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah, though they do not appear at the contest itself. The terms were simple. 2 bulls would be prepared for sacrifice. Each side would call upon their deity. The God who answered with fire would be acknowledged as the true God. Before the crowd, Elijah cried, "How long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." 1 Kings 18:21. The people stood silent, torn between fear, tradition, and the truth they had forgotten. The prophets of Baal. From morning until noon, the prophets of Baal called upon their God. They danced, shouted, and pleaded, "O Baal, answer us." But the heavens were silent. Elijah mocked them, "Shout louder. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." 1 Kings 18:27. In desperation, they cut themselves with swords and spears until their blood flowed. Yet still no fire fell. Their god of storms could not summon even a spark. Elijah's prayer. When it was Elijah's turn, he rebuilt the Lord's altar with 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel, reminding the people of their covenant identity. He prepared the sacrifice and, in a bold display of faith, drenched the altar with water until it overflowed into a trench. Then Elijah prayed simply, "Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." 1 Kings 18:37. Fire from heaven. Immediately the fire of the Lord fell. It consumed not only the bull, but also the wood, the stones, the soil, and even the water in the trench. The people fell face down and cried, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." 1 Kings 18:39. Elijah ordered the false prophets seized, and judgment was carried out. Soon after, rain returned to the land, ending the long drought. Themes in Elijah's story: 1. God's power. Where Baal was silent, God answered with overwhelming fire. The contest revealed the emptiness of idols and the unmatched reality of the living God. 2. God's faithfulness. Though Israel had turned away, God sought to bring their hearts back. The fire on Mount Carmel was not just a display of might, but an act of mercy, calling his people to repentance. 3. Confrontation with idolatry. Elijah's question, "How long will you waver?" echoes through history. Idolatry may take different forms today, but the call remains the same, to serve the one true God wholeheartedly. Conclusion: a God who answers by fire. The story of Mount Carmel is more than a dramatic miracle. It is a revelation of God's identity. He is not silent, asleep, or distant. He is the God who answers, who calls his people back, and who proves his presence in undeniable ways. Elijah's victory was not about the triumph of one prophet over many, but about the faithfulness of God over the false promises of idols. And just as fire fell on Mount Carmel, so too would fire fall at Pentecost, marking the presence of God, not on an altar of stone, but in the hearts of his people. Daniel in the lion's den, faithfulness under pressure. When prayer becomes a test of courage. Thank you for watching our videos. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to help us spread the gospel. The kingdom of Babylon had fallen, and the Medes and Persians now ruled the land. Among the officials serving the new empire was Daniel, an exile from Judah who had already distinguished himself under previous kings. His wisdom, integrity, and faithful service made him stand out once again, and soon he rose to become one of the most trusted administrators in King Darius's court. But success often breeds jealousy. Other officials, envious of Daniel's position and influence, plotted his downfall. They searched for flaws in his work, but none could be found. Daniel was blameless in his duties, except in one area that could be exploited: his devotion to God, a decree against prayer. The conspirators devised a cunning plan. They persuaded King Darius to issue a royal decree. For 30 days, no one was to pray to any god or man except the king. Anyone who disobeyed would be thrown into the den of lions. The king, flattered by the proposal and unaware of the trap, signed it into law. According to the custom of the Medes and Persians, once sealed, the decree could not be altered. Daniel's unshaken faith. When Daniel learned of the decree, he did not waver. 3 times a day, as was his custom, he went to his upstairs room, opened the windows toward Jerusalem, and prayed to the Lord. His enemies were waiting. They caught him in the act and rushed to report it to the king. Darius, realizing too late that he had been manipulated, was deeply distressed. He admired Daniel and sought every way possible to save him, but the law was unchangeable. At sunset, the sentence was carried out. Daniel was lowered into the lion's den. A night in the den. Before sealing the stone over the den, King Darius spoke with a mixture of hope and sorrow. May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. Daniel 6:16. That night, the king fasted, refusing food or entertainment. He could not sleep, his thoughts consumed with worry for his faithful servant. At dawn, he hurried to the den and cried out, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? Daniel 6:20. From within came a steady voice. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. Daniel 6:22. Vindication and justice. Not a scratch was found on him, for he had trusted in his God. But the plotters who had conspired against him faced the fate they had designed, thrown into the lion's den, where they were instantly overcome. Darius then issued a new decree throughout the empire, declaring reverence for the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. Daniel 6:26-27. Themes in Daniel's story. 1. Trust. Daniel's life reminds us that true trust in God does not shrink back in the face of danger. He valued faithfulness to God more than safety, reputation, or position. 2. Prayer. Even under threat of death, Daniel remained steadfast in prayer. His devotion was not an act of defiance, but of consistency. He prayed as he had always done, seeking God's presence above all. 3. God's protection. The lions' mouths were shut not by human strength, but by God's intervention. His deliverance showed that he is able to protect those who belong to him, even in impossible circumstances. Conclusion. Faith in the living God. The story of Daniel and the lions. Den is more than a tale of survival. It is a testimony to the power of unwavering faith. Daniel's courage challenges us to remain steadfast in prayer and devotion, even when the world pressures us to compromise. In the end, the lion's den became a stage for God's glory, proving that he is the living God who rescues and saves. Just as he delivered Daniel, he is present with all who trust him, even in their darkest nights. Jonah and the great fish, running from God's mercy, a prophet's struggle with obedience and compassion. When God calls a prophet, the typical response is awe, fear, or reluctant obedience. But when the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, he chose an altogether different path he ran. God's command was clear. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. Jonah 1-2, Nineveh was the proud capital of Assyria, infamous for its brutality and violence. To Jonah, it was not just a wicked city, it was the enemy of Israel. Why should God show them warning, much less mercy? Jonah could not accept such a mission. Fleeing the call, instead of heading northeast toward Nineveh, Jonah went in the opposite direction. He boarded a ship bound for Tarshish, as far away as possible from the presence of the Lord, but God does not abandon his purposes. A violent storm arose, threatening to break the ship apart. The sailors, terrified, each cried out to their gods and cast lots to find the cause of the disaster. The lot fell on Jonah. Confronted, Jonah confessed. He was fleeing from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He told them the only way to calm the storm was to throw him into the sea. Reluctantly, and after desperate attempts to row back to land, the sailors did as he said. At once, the sea grew calm, and the sailors offered sacrifices and vows to the Lord. Jonah, meanwhile, sank beneath the waves, swallowed whole by the deep. But God had appointed a great fish to swallow him, preserving his life in the strangest of sanctuaries. A prayer from the deep. For 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah remained in the belly of the fish. In the darkness, he prayed not a prayer of despair, but of thanksgiving. In my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. Jonah 2-2, he recognized God's mercy that even in his rebellion, God had spared his life. At last, the Lord commanded the fish to vomit Jonah onto dry land. Preaching in Nineveh, once again, the word of the Lord came to Jonah. Go to Nineveh. This time Jonah obeyed. He entered the city and proclaimed, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Jonah 3-4, to Jonah's astonishment, the people believed. From the king to the commoner, they fasted, put on sackcloth, and turned from their evil ways. Even the king decreed repentance, saying, who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. Jonah 3:09, and God did relent. He saw their repentance and withheld destruction. Jonah's anger and God's lesson, but Jonah was furious. He prayed angrily, confessing the real reason he had fled in the first place. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Jonah 4:2, to Jonah, Nineveh did not deserve mercy. He left the city and sat outside, waiting to see if God might still destroy it. There, God provided a leafy plant to shade him from the sun, which pleased Jonah greatly. But the next day, God sent a worm to wither the plant, and a scorching wind beat down on Jonah until he grew faint. God then spoke, you have been concerned about this plant, though you did not tend it or make it grow. Should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh, in which there are more than 120,000 people, who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and also many animals? Jonah 4:10-11, the story ends there open, unresolved, leaving readers to wrestle with the heart of God's mercy and the limits of human compassion. Themes in Jonah's story. 1. Obedience. Jonah's flight shows the futility of resisting God's call. Even in rebellion, God's will prevails not only over the prophet but through him. 2. Mercy. The mercy of God is not limited by human prejudice. He extends compassion even to enemies, proving that his love surpasses boundaries of nation, tribe, and worthiness. 3. Repentance. The repentance of Nineveh demonstrates that no people are beyond redemption. Even the greatest of sinners can find forgiveness when they turn toward God. Conclusion: the God of relentless compassion. The book of Jonah is not just about a prophet and a fish. It is about the clash between human resentment and divine mercy. Jonah wanted justice, but God offered compassion. Jonah sought escape, but God pursued him with relentless purpose. In the end, the story leaves us with a question. Will we share in God's heart for mercy, even toward those we consider undeserving? The God of Jonah is the God who calls, forgives, and saves, not just Israel, not just the righteous, but all who turn to him.